Oh, Canada. Are you really land of the free, or are you now just home of the property rights apocalypse courtesy of exploding Indigenous land claims? As many of you know, this kicked off with the Cowichan tribe in British Columbia, where a BC Supreme Court ruled that they hold Aboriginal title over nearly 2,000 acres of Richmond property, the infrastructure of which could be worth up to $100 billion. This private property has been owned by Canadians for nearly 2 centuries, but is now suddenly defective in the eyes of the law. So what's actually happening here? There are court battles where First Nations assert pre-existing Indigenous rights to land that predates European settlement and can override modern titles. Sort of a "we were here first" argument. To which I might ask, well then, who was here before the Cowichan? Anyway, this ruling was just a spark that lit the fuse. In BC, Indigenous tribes are currently attempting to take over the entire city of Kamloops, Coquitlam, Sun Peak resorts, mines, railroads, and more private holdings. In Ontario, First Nations got their territorial rights affirmed by the Superior Court in June, and now they're attempting to take over hydro dams and historical diversions. Over in Quebec, a lawsuit dropped last month with Indigenous claiming title to huge territories in the west, including islands and private lands. And on the east coast, New Brunswick is battling such a massive title claim that the provincial government is scrambling to get it dismissed in court. This isn't some isolated dust-up. It's a nationwide cascade shaking loose the bedrock of private property. Now, what does this mean for the average Canadian? Well, in one example, a Richmond farmer who has owned his land for 51 years cannot get his mortgage renewed because the Cowichan ruling has clouded his land title. There's also a $100 million development project that got its financing yanked. Now, some claim it's unrelated, but it's sort of an odd coincidence given the location and nationwide housing shortage that we're currently facing. So banks are clearly concerned, and insurance companies are taking a walk. At this point, buying or selling land in Canada feels less like an investment for the future and more like a Russian roulette. But zoom out, and it gets worse. Corporations and foreign investors, the engine that fuels the economy, are looking at Canada and thinking, why pour billions into a place where titles can evaporate overnight? Mines, resorts, farms, cities, everything is at risk. If these claims hold, at best, we'll have a new perpetual property tax where owners pay ongoing tribute to First Nations to keep using their land. At worst, full reclamation, evictions, and a fire sale of assets as people flee the country. And riddle me this. How does this square with Mark Carney's new budget, where he's promising $1 trillion in investment and growth over 5 years, fueled by massive government spending to unlock potential and drive innovation? The answer, of course, is that it doesn't. This land rights debacle roadblocks the entire premise. You can't lure $1 trillion in capital when property titles are as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. Investors want certainty, not court battles and mortgage denials. Carney's big spend is supposed to attract private money into infrastructure, energy, and growth sectors. But if land can be reclaimed or tied up in endless litigation, who is dumb enough to invest? This isn't building Canada strong. It's turning us into a cautionary tale for the entire world.